Hi there! So last week a port of Thronebreaker, The Witcher Tales was released for the Switch, and this is a game that I've always wanted to play since I've heard good things about it. It's a Witcher spin-off based on Gwent, which I really enjoyed playing in Witcher 3, and given CD Projekt Red's track record, it should be pretty good. Now, what's strange about this game is that it got very little attention both from players and from developers. It wasn't, and still isn't, really heavily advertised. The Switch port wasn't teased or even announced, it just sort of happened, and the game doesn't even have its own forum on the CD Projekt Red website. Maybe it's because they don't want people that like Gwent playing this instead of the main Gwent standalone game? I don't know. But I finally decided to try this out, given that it seems like a good game to have on the go. And it turns out that's not really the case. But before I move on and tell you all about it, please remember to check out the other videos on the channel and subscribe if you enjoy them. And also leave your comment down below on what type of game the next Witcher spin-off should be. Should it be a Pokemon style game where you have to capture all the Neckers, Kikimoras, Manticores and other monsters of the Witcherverse? You tell me. Okay, let's start with some of the stuff specific to this port of the game, because it has a couple of problems. First of all, there are performance issues in docked mode, specifically when running across the world. The game stutters in some instances, and there are some very rough edges present in some of the animations seen in the cards. Cards will also occasionally load in a lower detail than they should when selecting them. None of this affects gameplay since everything is turn-based, but it is annoying, and though it might get fixed with a patch down the road, I don't think this is a priority for developers right now. The other issue I have with the port is the brightness. This is an exceedingly dark game, and it can be almost impossible to play this out on the open on a sunny day or even in a bright room. There's no brightness slider, and the screen on the Switch is kinda dim already, so yeah, it's not the best. So while I am liking the game, I don't really recommend that you play this on the Switch unless that's your only platform. In terms of the game itself, Thronebreaker is a strange game. What confused me the most before picking this up when watching the trailers was the walking around portion, the exploration part of it. Turns out that part is pretty straightforward. You move across the countryside, which is completely ravaged by war and looks really good, by the way. And as you make your way to the next story waypoint, you find resources to pick up and some NPCs with dialogues that will occasionally require you to make a decision, which can net you more rewards or have an effect on the way the story plays out, or maybe trigger a special battle. You also have access to your camp, which is where you basically spend resources to be able to make better cards and where you customize your deck. Back on the map, there's also combat encounters either against humans or monsters, and that part, the combat, is definitely not as straightforward as you think. You might think that the combat in the game is basically Gwent, but that's not really the case. I don't think I have to explain what Gwent is to anyone watching this, but if you don't know or don't remember, it's a card game made for The Witcher 3, which has you trying to outscore your opponent in 2 out of 3 rounds. That's basically it. Now, the times in Thronebreaker where you actually get to play 3 rounds are exceedingly few. Almost every battle in the game is limited to 1 round, and I'd say that at least half of them, probably more, have special rules or winning conditions. Sometimes it's eliminating a specific unit, other times it's moving cards to different rows and stuff like that. Some are actual puzzles to the point that they have a puzzle icon on the map and can only be won by playing your cards in a very specific way. Now, at first, this caught me by surprise, not in a good way, because it wasn't really what I was expecting from the game, and you know, during the first few hours, you're not really building your deck or even using it a lot, since most of the battles will give you a predetermined set of cards to play with. This carries on to a lesser degree throughout the rest of the game, and it's both good and bad. It's good because you know that you can beat these battles as they are, and that if you lose, it's not because you drew bad cards or because your deck sucks. It also works as a really good way for the game to teach you how to use specific cards, often in very unusual ways. What's not so good is that if you're playing this specifically because you like Gwent and you like building your deck and all of that, then that isn't really most of the game. As I said, you play a lot of battles with a deck that's given to you, and the battles that you do play with your deck, almost none of them are the standard 3-round style Gwent. This approach I think does work, however, and it makes for some interesting battles and scenarios where there is some storytelling done through the cards that couldn't really be accomplished otherwise. But it's not a traditional deck building game at all. Some encounters do require that you customize your deck a certain way to counter a specific strategy that the enemy might be using, like spawning dozens of cards to no end or constantly buffing their own cards. And there's a second part of this. I'm not sure if I would consider this a fault or not, but sometimes you go into an encounter and after playing 3 cards, you realize what the enemy is going for or what the objective is, and you know that there's absolutely no way that you're gonna win with your current deck. So you have to forfeit the round, reload and tune your deck before triggering the encounter again. It's a strange type of difficulty. It mostly happens if you have a deck built around, not dealing too much damage to the enemy, and the game requires you to kill a specific unit which might have a lot of health. So if your deck isn't built for that, you'll have to quit the battle, customize your deck again and go at it again. I don't know, it's strange. Joining these two parts, the combat and the exploration part of the game, is the storytelling and the dialogue, which are extremely well done. The voice acting is incredible and the story and the characters are believable and interesting.
Come on, cutthroat!
I beg your pardon and cry foul! I am anything but common!
You needn't get excited, Cole.
There's really nothing to criticize here. Every voice line is delivered perfectly. Everything is top-notch. The characters have distinct personalities and manners of speech, and there are consequences to your decisions which affect the story. The art is also great everywhere. Some of the cards have really cool animations and drawings, and the landscape, backgrounds, and animated cutscenes all look really good. The music is also fantastic, with some music being from The Witcher 3, but most seems to be original to this game. The sound effects are also really well done, and overall, that part of the game, the art, the sounds are top level. Especially if you consider that this is a relatively cheap game. The Switch version is $20, and I bet that you can get the PC version for much cheaper. Now lastly, there are some weird decisions in terms of UI and overall design, which could be much better. First of all, there's a way to spend resources to increase your movement across the map, which seems like an incredibly bizarre choice, since it's basically conceding that the default running speed isn't fast enough, and it isn't, but having to spend a considerable amount of your resources to increase it it's a weird choice. It almost makes you wonder if, resources really do matter in the game. And in terms of resource management, there isn't really too much to think about in terms of gaining resources, since most will come from either pickups, hidden treasures, or the battles that you fight. So the only actual management you're making is in terms of where you're gonna spend it. And there's a problem here as well. There doesn't seem to be a way to properly preview the cards that you're about to unlock, so there's no way to know beforehand exactly how many resources they will take to construct or place on your deck, which is a problem because the amount of resources that you have to spend to unlock new cards is extremely high. There are quite a number of cards that are unlocked through gameplay, and I kind of wish that there was a better system in place here, instead of just gating cards behind a huge resource payment that you might regret later. Because confounding this problem is the fact that there's no way to manage multiple saves, at least not on the Switch. It might be You know, it might be possible on PC by just copying the files, but here, once you make a decision, you're stuck with it, you know, no matter what. So if you messed up and you invested your money in the wrong type of cards, there's really no way to undo that, and I just don't like that. Then there's also the fact that when you get into a battle, you get some storytelling through a text, but the battle doesn't start loading until you click continue, which will skip to the battle as soon as the loading is done, meaning that if you want to read the text, you read it and then you start loading, which is also weird. There's quite a number of minor nuances like this that could be better. To name a few more, while walking around the map, you sometimes get stuck on plants or terrain, and turning around isn't as fluid or as fast as it should be. And sometimes the description on a card isn't really clear enough, or sometimes the way you go around the menu isn't very intuitive. None of this is really all that bad, but it's just, you know, strange, and it certainly detracts from the overall experience. Overall, I think the game is pretty good, however. It's not mind-blowing or anything, but it's good for a $20 game, and it's also pretty long. It clocks in around, you know, 35 to 45 hours if you want to do everything. If I had to score it, I would probably give it a 7 out of 10, since there's plenty of room for improvement, I think. So, if you're thinking about picking this up because you like card games in general and you like good storytelling, I definitely recommend it. If you're only in it for the deck building, I think there are better games out there. You should, however, definitely try and play this on PC and not on the Switch if you can. You might think I'm exaggerating with the stuff about the brightness, but it really is almost unplayable out in the open, which is a real disappointment. The colors are almost always dark green and dark brown most of the time, so there's really not a lot of contrast, and that translates to a very bad portable experience. Okay, that will be all for now. Next video, I might be doing some tips for this game as I get deeper into it, I don't know. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.